Hear me.
Hello, my name is Zachariah with Old Man Gaming, and this is another Snap Judgement review. What is a Snap Judgement review if you've never listened before? Well, I think most gaming reviews nowadays get too caught up with completing or near completing games. They forget what it's like to play the game right off the bat. So what I do here is I do about 5 to 10 hours with any game I'm reviewing. I'm trying to give you an idea whether you're going to enjoy it right away or not. In addition to that factor, and the fact that I think games are one of the most subjective forms of art, I also don't give scores to my reviews. Instead, I'll be telling you what the game is overall. I'll be telling you the pros and the cons of the game from my point of view, as all reviews are. And I'll be telling you whether I personally will be sticking with this game outside the purposes of this review. And we got an interesting one today. We're doing Wayfinder, 2023's Wayfinder. So this game's been out for a year, and I can't even go into it without talking about its kind of tortured history. So let's just get that out of the way. Wayfinder was originally published by Digital Extremes, the company that makes Warframe, but is actually made by a developer called Airship Syndicate. Now, I was very excited about this game in 2022. If you look back to the things that I was talking about on the podcast, this was a game that was like one of my big ones that I couldn't wait to play. Then it released. They released it for, I believe, a $40 price tag. They jam-packed it full of weird microtransactions and a lot of grindiness. I mean, it's a MMO, so you expect grindiness. And then they just had catastrophic server problems. They couldn't get anybody in there, and we're not talking like a couple of days like some of the other online games have when they first launched. We're talking about like weeks, even months. People could not get on, could not log in, could not play this game. So it has recently gone on sale for only $17, and it boasted no more microtransactions. The microtransactions had been removed, and a number of things had been redone, re-looked at, whatnot. So while I had played it in the alphas and the betas phase, I had never actually done a review. I never bought it because it was such a catastrophic thing. So let's see, does it come back? Does it hold up? How is it? Well, let's get into it. But before we get into the pros and cons, what is Wayfinder? Wayfinder is an MMO of sorts, kind of more akin to Warframe. I'm not going to lie, even though this is by a different developer than Digital Extremes, I completely understand why Digital Extremes was interested in it. The loop, the way it plays, very similar to Warframe. In some ways, I would actually say less complicated, which is nice, more streamlined version. You play one of, at this point, I think 7 different characters. You only get to pick 3. You get to pick one of the 3 starting ones to do the tutorial missions through. You're a character in a kind of fantasy / steampunk fantasy sort of world who is killed trying to protect the world from this encroaching darkness called the Gloom. The Gloom is just this stuff of evil, and anything consumed by the Gloom just kind of becomes like random and chaotic and whatnot. But you're so powerful. These characters are so powerful. They have so much force of will that they actually manage to kind of find themselves back with the help of this character back in the last remaining human town of Skylight, named Omen, to find themselves back to reality. But you realize these characters aren't human anymore. They've literally reshaped themselves out of the Gloom. They cannot die. They can also have certain powers over the Gloom, which allow them to return to the Gloom, survive treks into the Gloom, expeditions to the Gloom, and even fight back the Gloom in certain situations. So that's kind of the base storyline. At that point, you kind of like you pick your character. Much like every other MMO, looter MMO, you have a series of abilities that you can fire off every so often due to cooldown. You have gear scores that you're trying to build up and get higher so that you can do bigger stuff. There are some interesting mechanics on this. Each character has its own set of affinities, talents, and other sorts of skill trees that make the build options very robust here. And we'll get into that a little bit more in the pros. But the overall story, you have this very I want to say Paladin's kind of cartoony art style to it, and how the game progresses kind of in the most nearest terms. You have this big gateway that allows you to go on expeditions, which are procedurally generated from previous missions that you've done, basically. There's also boss fights that you can unlock by doing certain things, and then you just go right to the boss fight. How you get to these places is the big gate only operates in places that you've been before. What you do is you go out into this open world where there's a lot of these different little portals. You find the portal for whatever story mission you're on. You go through the expedition, and once you've gone through it once, you can then access it from the gate in the city, which is kind of nice. It's kind of much easier. You don't have to constantly keep going out into the open world, getting lost. You bash your way through everything. You take these things called echoes from your bad guys, which all of them give different stat buffs, different stat up increases, and they can all be slotted into your weapons, equipment, whatever. You can have 3 different items that boost your skills. You get a set of weapon, and then you have an armor set that is unique to the character. The armor sets are actually the only thing that is unique to the character, which we're going to talk about in the pros. The weapons can be interchanged, even though they don't really broadcast that. And then after that, it's pretty self-explanatory. If you've played one, you've played them all in the most generalist terms, which is find new loot, upgrade your character, get new missions to find new loot. That's the loop, over and over and over again, with some story kind of interweaved and mixed in. So, without further ado, let's get to the meat and potatoes of this, the pros, the cons, and whether or not I'm going to keep playing it. To start with the pros, I always like to go positive first. Right off the bat, I want to talk about the interesting combat mechanics. We're talking about the weapon types. Every weapon feels very different here, which is something I appreciated. You play a game like Destiny, and all of the weapons in Destiny fire kind of the same way. Like if you've had one pistol, you've had a bunch of pistols. They have little different variations, but overall it's just a looter shooter. Even Borderlands, which have a wide array of guns, it's still point, click, shoot. That's it. With this, you have, and granted there's only I think like 5 different weapon types, but those 5 different weapon types all handle completely differently. If you're talking about the scythe and the breaker, they're completely different from the vanguard, which is a sword and shield, and the daggers, and then the different types of firearms that you can get. It's very interesting and creates very unique kind of play styles. One of the things I really liked about the gun is you have this thing called a hot reload. So when you're firing the gun and you run out of shells, you get this little bar and a line starts to go through. If you press shoot in the kind of like stated line, so you have to kind of be patient even in the middle of battle, but if you hit it in the right spot, your gun instantaneously reloads and you deal a critical damage to somebody else. If you miss it, you then have to wait a whole extra amount of time while you reload, kind of almost like botching the hot reload. I thought this was a really cool mechanic. It made gunfighting really interesting, and it made you really have to think about your shots instead of just like pointing and spraying, which most of these games, that's what they are. Get the gun with the right effects, and then point, shoot, done. With this, I didn't feel that way. I feel like there is a strategy to how these are implemented. Sometimes it feels like just bashing on people. I'm not going to argue with that, but every one of these MMOs does. What I like here is that every one of the weapons kind of beckons you to learn that weapon's mechanics and how that weapon works. To the point where your special moves, your big special, like you have 4 abilities that your character can do that are unique to the characters. But the weapon abilities, every weapon has an ability and they all work completely differently. You have like the sword and shield as you block and counterattack with it, which these games don't usually have blocking and counterattack, but this does. As you block and counterattack with it, you will build up this shield meter and the effectiveness of a shield bash, which will actually break your opponent's defense. As opposed to the rifle, which gives a really quick, powerful kind of explosive scatter shot, but actually pushes your character back and out of combat. Like all of these things mechanically work very differently, and I really appreciated that. I liked that. Well, I found that like with one character who I had built up to have a sword and shield, I could stand blow for blow with the enemies, and as long as I had my combos down and I was kind of timing when I was, block countering, I could just stand there and go toe-to-toe with them. Whereas with the guns, I have to constantly move around because there's no defense. But I have to be very aware of when I'm going to reload and when that time is, because if I just keep hitting the button and whacking away at it, I'm going to miss that hot reload. I'm going to miss the chance for the critical, and I'm going to spend a bunch of time without ammo in my gun. This kind of stuff is evident throughout all of the weapons, and I really appreciate that. My next big one is going to be the builds in this. At first, I was underwhelmed because everything you get is just a series of numbers, kind of like Destiny, just like plus 150 or minus 3,000, whatever. And it all just adds into these generic numbered stats. And I didn't feel like putting stuff on things was making a different change. That being said, now that I've started to get into it, started to understand the stat system, but even more so, figured out that you could switch the weapons between each character. And what I mean by that is, if you play Silo right off the bat, he starts with a rifle. So you just assume he's the rifle guy. Especially with like a hero game. This feels like a hero shooter. You're just expecting them to have that same weapon at all times. But you realize at some point that the abilities they have, though they probably complement the weapon they started with, they're not required by that weapon. And then all of a sudden I tried to equip a different weapon, and then boom, it was mad. So right off the bat, I could use all sorts of different builds. One of the things that I want to point out, Nis Assassin, all of her abilities are about dodges, really quick in and out attacks, and they started with daggers because she's good at like kind of getting in, slashing, and moving out. I actually built her up with guns, and it was much more interesting with like a shotgun because she still has those like quick dodge attacks, but now you're dodging out of combat, and those dodges, when you dodge, you deal damage and status effects to your opponents. So I'm dodging and shooting and staying away from the opponents while dealing damage. Like, this is the kind of stuff it opened up. The Gladiator character, when I unlocked her, Senja, she does not have... She starts with a greatsword. I hated the greatsword, but I loved Senja. I love her abilities. There are all these weird showboaty abilities that I really enjoyed. So I switched her out with the sword and shield, and she is so much fun to just tank with, especially since her abilities revolve around standing there taking damage and taunting, like almost to an invisible crowd. So it just makes sense to be just right in the middle of it with a sword and shield. There are a lot of interesting build combinations here, and I think, especially if somebody's more adept with numbers than I am, you can really go crazy with it. You add in the fact that every character, once they get to a certain level, and at first I didn't think this, it kind of bloomed right at the like 5 or 6 hour mark, but you unlock affinities and talents. Talents are a full-on skill tree that you can level up with the character, and affinities actually add to the effectiveness of the items you put on. So like, there are so many different options for how you build up your character. I really enjoy that. All right, my next one, and this is a big one. This is definitely a correction on their part. There are no microtransactions in this. There definitely were microtransactions in this, a lot of them. There was definitely a store before, and that's how you bought the characters, the new characters, as they came out. That is gone. Granted, you don't start with all the characters, which we're going to talk about later in the cons. They are relatively easy to grind. You don't have to like collect a bunch of different resources like you used to have to. Instead, you do a certain thing and an RNG number eventually just drops a character gem in your lap and you summon them. And just to point out how easy it is to get these characters, to get Kyrios, you have to do void dungeons. He dropped on the second void dungeon I did. To get Senja, you have to defeat mimics, like the treasure chest mimics. The second mimic I destroyed gave me Senja. And then Grendel, I don't know how you get Grendel, but I got him. He just unlocked randomly. So they're very easy unlocks. I have almost every character in the game, and I've only been playing for about 6 or 7 hours at this point. So yeah, the only one I'm missing is Venomous. I don't know how I get her yet, but I'm sure she will just fall in my lap like every other one. So when you pay for this game, you pay for everything. And an MMO is very rare. there is this like battle pass thing, but there's no premium mode of that. You just collect keys as you do stuff and unlock new trinkets and extra stuff for your character. I paid $17. It was on sale through the 26th, so I'm pretty sure it's going to still be on sale when I release this review. I paid 17 some dollars, maybe 18 with tax. And the entire game is there. There is nothing missing. Is there a ton of grinding? Sure, it's an MMO. That's what this is. It's a Warframe type, but I paid for it and I got everything, which is really nice. There's not even an expectancy. Like even with Warframe, where you can get just about everything in that for free, it's just tons of grinding or pay for it. And don't get me wrong, I felt the need to pay for some of it because it is a free-to-play game. Overall, you still feel like you kind of have to. Like, how am I ever going to get to that? With this, you're going to get it. You just keep playing, which is really nice. Finally, I do want to throw out that the art style and the unique character styles. First, the art style. I actually like this kind of cartoony, weird art style. I always kind of have. I don't know why. I really enjoyed playing Paladins back in the day and Realm Royale. Mainly for the art style. I just think it's a cool little aesthetic, like a very steampunky, cartoon kind of Saturday morning feel to it. That being said, it's not going to be for everyone, but I enjoyed it. I liked it quite a bit. And then the unique character styles, one thing I really like about this is with games like this, often they can feel very similar. I think Warframe did a really good job of making their Warframes very different feeling in the actual combat of things, but they still even move kind of similar. This, I really feel like I'm playing a different character every time I switch characters. There is this, like, their abilities just are so completely different. Like I said, Senja so far has been my favorite. She's the gladiator woman. All of her abilities revolve around holding the button down when you're doing the ability, and she taunts taking damage, but healing while she's taking damage for bigger effects, which also fills this meter called crowd love, which is hysterical to me because you're in dungeons. That kind of stuff was really cool. Whereas then you had Kyrios, who was much more about inflicting kind of damage on people from far and recovering their abilities faster. Every character has a slew of passives, and of course in addition to their active abilities, which is really nice. And then they all have unique armor sets to collect. I do want to say the abilities in the unique armor sets, the only thing locked to the characters. Everything else is gettable in some way, shape, or form. Sorry, this one is getting a little long-winded, but there's a lot to say here. Let's go into the cons. Let's do it. First of all, number one, how they do the characters to start pissed me off a little bit. You have 7 characters, right? All cool characters, all unique characters. However, the initial tutorial mission prompts you to pick one of the 3. That is the one you start with. You can't switch off of that. You don't get all 3. You've got to grind them out. What kind of pissed me off, though, is they don't make you grind out the other ones. Once you get through the first, 2 or 3 hours, you're just given the summoning stones for the other 2 tutorial characters, right? So there's that. What I would have preferred with this, I understand that they can't add every new character to the tutorial because that's just not how you program a game like this. That being said, what I would really like is they give you some sort of chit so that when you are starting a game and you get through just that initial tutorial mission, they then go, here's a chit, summon one of the other characters for free. So that you can at least get that second character, try something else out, because one of the best parts about this game is the characters, the character variety, switching between the characters for different things, building them differently in different ways. I don't mind having to earn them in-game. I understand why that's there. That being said, especially since it's a relatively easy process like I previously mentioned, but just let me start with more than one. Please. Especially when all of this love is given into this. Especially when maybe I chose wrong right off the bat, and I don't like this character. That's going to stale my my opinion of this right off the bat. Whereas if you allow me to select that second character right out of the tutorial, maybe I get one that I enjoy the second time around. Now I'm like, oh, now I see why I like this game. Next one, catchphrases. Holy crap, these characters, too many catchphrases. First of all, when the game is 100% fighting, like you're like even in areas where you're doing like town stuff, there's just constantly bad guys respawning and kill over and over and over again. In those kind of games, I don't want to hear your catchphrase every 10 to 15 seconds. Usually in games like this, and MMOs like this, your character is silent. There's a reason for that, other than maybe like grunts. There's a reason for that. Because I can only hear, wow, I really froze him out so many times before I vomit in my own mouth. I don't mind that these characters have personality. I also don't mind that they say stuff when they're doing their abilities. I don't want them to randomly talk. It is irritating and frustrating when they're just constantly like, where are we going next? Like, please stop talking. Let me play the game. Let me see here. The next two things kind of almost go hand in hand. The first one is minor glitches. There is definitely some technical issues here. First of all, when I went into the game on my PC, I'm running a 5600 XT, so it is a bit of an older graphics card, but I'm putting it on an SSD, which is required, which is a little bit ridiculous for the graphics that you're getting. It also has some frame rate dips. This is an early access game still. It's still an early access, but it's got frame rate dips. It's got all sorts of weird little hitches and whatnot. I actually had to turn my frame rate lock down to about 60, and then the game ran fine. It started out like freed up to like 240 frames. But when you get into the really big open area of the Highlands, which is kind of the open world exploration, things just started to chug. That being said, messing with that fixed it. Still, there are some other bugs. Every once in a while, even with the frame rate right, I will just bamf somewhere else. The characters, when they're having dialogue with each other, they'll be talking, and then the NPCs will just stop moving their mouth even though they're still talking. Like, the animation got to the point of being done before the words got there. Like, just loop the animation, guys. What are you doing? Stuff like that. Little bugs, little minor glitches. Overall, didn't really take from my experience. Nothing game-breaking or anything, but I gotta point it out here in the comments. And then finally, the ledging. The ledging bugged me because there are certain places you can ledge up, right? So your character can ledge, like or what do they call it? Like, it's not vaulting. It's oh, that's gonna drive me nuts. But mantling. So like you'll double jump next to an area, and if it's just the right size, you'll catch that ledge and pull yourself up. But only if it's a certain ledge type. Like, it has to have, like, scuff marks on it. If it doesn't, even if I jump to the right height, he won't catch the edge and jump up. Drives me nuts. Because I'm like, I could make this jump, but I can't. So, certain specific ledges are the only places where you could mantle. That's weird. That's just so weird. You can either mantle or you can't mantle in the game. What are we doing here? Like you can mantle in other games, like the whole yellow paint thing. Yeah, but you could still mantle everywhere else. It's that they're marking you the best way to mantle. This one, it's like, you can only mantle on those places with the scuffs, period. That's a little ridiculous. Alright, whether or not I'm going to stick with it, I am going to stick with it. I am enjoying it. I don't know how long I'm going to stick with it. I will say these kind of games tend to sour with me after a certain amount of time. This game has a really good way of kind of bringing something new to the table every so often, which has kept me going. You know, the newer characters, trying a new character, opening up those affinities, messing with those build options. But it does get kind of like, alright, run this dungeon, come back. Run this dungeon, come back. And only truly extraordinary games such as like Warframe get me in that. Warframe really kept me in because I could keep getting those new frames. Warframe has like 50 frame options. This game has 7 characters, and I've got 6 of them. So I don't know how long this is going to hold my attention. But it is. It's holding my attention, and I am enjoying it. So, did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? Did I just talk for too long? You can let me know in the below. And P.S., one last little factor. Not that I haven't said enough already. There is some apartment building in this, which I I don't understand why it's there at all. Like, you just decorate your home with shit you find out in dungeons. It's a cooler thing. It's a cool, like, extra thing to quest for, but it doesn't have any purpose. To the developers of this game, Airship Syndicate, if you're going to do stuff like that, allow us to have relationships. Allow us to interact with characters in our house. That would be really cool. Maybe all the characters that you've earned through Wayfinders can hang out there. Something along those lines. Give us some reason to be there, because otherwise it's just this empty apartment that I just stick shit in, and that's just weird. And then there are some really cool customization options. As you play a game, you unlock the pants and stuff, and you can get really creative with how you decorate your character, which I enjoyed. Since there is no character creation, I like the fact that those characters I could really get crazy with. Alright. Did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? Comment in the comments below. You can also contact us on Facebook X at Old Man Gaming number 9. You can contact us on Discord. You can influence this and all of our shows from there. The link is in the description below. As long as you guys keep watching this, with you making this, I'm going to endeavor to review Riders Republic next. It just went into Game Pass, so I'm excited to look at that. So hopefully that'll be up next week or the week after. And until then, see you guys later.